Hey, Lea Louise here. I want to talk to you about a scrappy quilt using what you have on hand. In my case, I'm using leftover charm squares, but to put a quilt together that's super simple. Whether you want to make it small, I'm making just a little seat cover, or make it huge. This is a project that'll work for you. You're going to love this pattern. You're going to love this process. The quick trick that I'm going to show you saves so much time. But then too, I also have a download for you I don't want you to miss. And that's going to show you how many charm squares you need for any size quilt you want to make. That's down below. Make sure you check it out. Oh, and also, these are cut fabrics. These are charm squares from them. So I'll put their links down below and you can check out their shop. So much to share with you today. Let's get started. I hope you are ready to quilt because I am going to jump right in. We have a quick project here. I'm going to show you beginning to end how to make a small quilt. You can expand this to any size. We're using precuts. 5-inch squares are a wonderful way to make a quick quilt because you don't have to do any of the cutting. They're already sized to piece quickly. They fit together wonderfully. And it's a really fast fix. Now, you can go scrappy. What I've done here is I have some batik charm squares that I got from the Precut, and they're beautiful and they're rich and the colors are fantastic. They stand out well. And fortunately, they also have a bundle of solids. And that works really good because if you're using a lot of different fabrics, putting solids in between can break up the color a bit, and I don't want two solids side by side. So it's always good to kind of lay it out and get an idea of what's going on and see what you like. But I want to make this as easy as possible. I want to piece this row by row. We'll use chain stitching and create a big web. And then once all the rows are done, I can come back and sew everything else together. But to make it super easy, I'm going to add one more step, and I think you're going to like this. This is called offset seams. And if we alternate our blocks, let me see. I want to put one here, and I want my purple one. Oh, that would go pretty here. No, purple. Not blue. So I'm putting half squares on each end, and let's see, this the blue kind of works good there, and I have a green. Purple always works well with green, and then we'll do another blue up here. So I took 3 charm squares and cut them in half, so now they're 2.5 inches long by 5. And when I'm sewing my grid with these half squares on each end, I'm not going to have any seams lined up. That makes this twice as fast. So what I'm going to do is get my fabrics staged and ready to sew them. And what I do is I'll take each row and I start from this side and end with my first fabric on top. This is the pile where I'll begin, and I'll begin here and I'll sew through. So I'm going to do the same with each of these all the way through. Then once this is finished, I'm going to take them over to my machine, and I'll bring you along so you can see me do this, and we'll get these sewn together, and before you know it, we'll have them quilted and we will have a finished piece. Now you may be wondering, with 25 charm squares, this is only going to be about 24 inches. What are we going to do with that? Well, this is intended to be a teaching project, but I'll tell you why I love it is you can easily expand it to make it larger into a baby quilt, lap quilt. I can't even say it. Whatever size you want, because it's that simple. You just keep adding. Actually, I have a free download you can get down below. The chart will break down for you. It's a reference chart for quilt sizes, how many charm squares you need for each size quilt. So I will include that, and then you will have that to determine just how many charm squares you want for a baby quilt. And actually, one charm square, especially if you have the big bundle that the Fabric Hut does, is 100. You could go 10 by 10, and that's 45 inches square. That is a great size quilt. It's a big baby quilt, but it's also kind of a lap size. So there are lots of options, and that's why I love charm squares, because you can just add an extra row or two here or there. And especially if you use the offset seam, which is what I'm going to show you here today. So I'm going to set this down next to me. What I do at my sewing table is my machine is on a smaller table. I don't have a lot of room to my side over here. So I bring my ironing board and set it right next to my table, and I adjust it to the same height so I can just reach over and grab my blocks as I'm sewing. It's a great time saver. So let me get moved over to my sewing machine and I'll show you just what we're going to do. I almost forgot. I want to show you how I transport my pieces. And I just lift them up carefully and I'll put them on my ruler, and now I can just carry it over, slide it onto my ironing board. This is assurance for me that I won't drop them. That's exactly what it is. I've got about 8 feet between me and my sewing machine, and there's lights and a camera, and so I want to make sure everything stays intact. But this is a great way. So if you have lots of different rows, you know, a much larger quilt, it transports easy, or you can use a cutting mat, or you can use a magazine, whatever you have that is a flat surface, and it's portable. So keep that in mind. I'm going to chain stitch my pieces, and the first thing I do is put my fabrics right sides together and sew them with my 1/4 inch. And we call this chain piecing because we don't cut our thread in between. We create a chain between our blocks. And so we're just going to continue. Okay, so we have our first set all taken care of, our first row or column. And now I'm just going to continue adding my blocks here. And one thing to keep in mind with your thread, as you're sewing, when you begin a new line of sewing, or you begin, there we go, at the edge of the fabric, hold this thread aside. This is your fabric, or excuse me, the thread from the top, from the spool on top of your machine, and this is the one that will knot up on you. And if you hold it aside and keep it in place, it's less apt to be a problem. Okay, so just work our way through here from the top to the bottom. When we get to the bottom, at the end of our first column, we're going to cut our thread and move back to the top and just start over. So give me a few minutes and I'll be right back with this, and we'll start sewing the other way. And now we have all our rows sewn across from side to side. And you notice these are uneven. See how they're not lining up? That's because we are creating, whoops, I'm all caught up here. We are creating offset seams. So I usually will start at the top and cut these apart. Now I'm going to set this on top of this one, and I'm going to sew. Now ordinarily I would press them, but because everything's just going to go in the same direction, I am just going to sew right through this, and then we will press it after. So I'm just going to start here on my 1/4 inch, hold my fabrics, so I line them up, and I want to make sure all my seams come this way. And so I just kind of finger press them a bit. And then underneath here, just kind of give it a squeeze between your thumb and finger, and that'll finger press it to get it in the direction that you want. And when we get to the end of the row, we should line up. There's a little bit off, but that is nothing to worry about. But what I want to show you is how this all comes together. So where these little blocks, narrow blocks, come in, see how it bumps everything over, and we don't have any seams to nest. It just goes together so quickly. There's no corners to match up. This is a breeze for making a charm square quilt. Now what I'm going to do is get the rest of this together, and I will show you what it looks like finished. We're just about there. How easy was that? And here's a little charm square quilt that I made, and it's 25 blocks, so it's 5 by 5, and it went together really quick, but you can see how all these seams line up. And the one I'm showing you today, you don't have to do that, but I want to show you on the back. This one does not have a middle layer. I have the quilt on top, and then I just use flannel on the back. And you can see that I didn't have enough flannel big enough, so I pieced it. So when you're putting things together, think about what you have that you can use and just make it very efficient and cost effective. For something small like this, like I said, this is a pad that I use in our chairs, our office chairs. We can use them on the sofa, living room furniture. If you have pets, I actually made one for our cat at one time. But this works out really well. So this is just the fabric and the flannel. And you can see how easy the quilting is. You can almost see it. It's been washed quite a few times, so it's been kind of mushed into the fabric, which is what will happen over time. But what I'm doing is using a piece of big flannel, and it's lightweight, but it's solid. You can also just use a cotton fabric, and you can use obviously something with a pattern design, and then this is a piece of white flannel. And the reason I'm putting this here, if you just want to make this really lightweight, you can use just a piece of flannel on the backing like I did, or you can put a centerpiece of flannel. This will actually make it a bit heavier and sturdier. So there are different options, but I'm going to use batting on this one. And this is a low loft batting. And it's funny, in the move, I haven't found my big rotary blades yet. So fortunately, I have my little cutter. At least I have something to cut with. So I'm going to go ahead and use a piece of batting and a piece of flannel in here. And I'm going to do my spray basting. And I just want to show you how quick and easy this is. You can certainly pin it. And even with flannel, the fabric doesn't move a whole lot. So it can go either way. It's very easy to work with. So what I'm going to do is just, I haven't used this can in a while, so it may be, it's working fine. So now what I'm going to do is just lay this here and lay this one here. And just lay it gently. You don't need to pull or stretch. Just lay it flat and then pull from the other side. And when you get to the point where you started the gluing, you can see how strong that's holding. Now, when I spray from the outer edge towards the middle, because that way I'm going to minimize any overspray that will perhaps go out onto my cutting mat or onto the floor. And now I'm going to do the same thing with my quilt. And here's my little quilt that I made with the offset corners. And so you can see I have about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch all the way around the edges. And I'm going to take this up. And I just want to show you how well this holds. I didn't put a lot on the corners because I know I'm really not going to need to. But see how the spray adhesive works really, really well. So I'm going to take this to the edge and put a little on and lay this over. And just let it lay gently. Don't pull or tug it. And then once it's down, see how I went off my batting up there? So I'm going to lift this. It doesn't hold it so tight that you can't lift it and replace it. All right, there we go, just like that. And now I'm going to lift this side up. And I can feel it's sticky right there. And I'll just lay this and spread it out with my hands. And there you go. And once you pat it down in place and, run your hands over it, everything's going to stick really well. And there we are. So now nothing's going to move when I sew this. This is a great way to do your basting. Now, like I said, I'm making this super simple. So the quilting is also going to be very easy. And I'm just going to follow my seams and just do some channel quilting along those seams. Then I'll also baste the outer edge. And then we can talk about how we'll bind this. It's going to be very easy. And here we are. Check this out. Isn't that pretty? I love all the colors, the simple quilting. You can see on the back, it's just narrow channel quilting. I did 1/4 inch along each seam on both sides, and it just makes a really nice quilted look for this. It's small, it's simple. We don't need to get elaborate. Now, the one thing I am going to do is trim this, and because it's roughly 24, 25 inches, I'm going to use my 2-foot ruler, and I'm going to show you just how easy this can be. What I'm going to do is run my ruler from corner to corner, and you'll see that these middle sections can be protruding out. Now, a lot of times that has to do with the quilting. When you're sewing, you're stretching it just the littlest bit. So I will come in and I will pull those centers into the middle of my quilt because there's no reason to cut that off. It's part of the quilt, and just by pulling that in a little bit, it's going to keep the fullness of the quilt and it won't make it tight across the center. And I'm going to cut it right along the edge. There we go. Just like that. And so we have a nice clean edge that we can sew along. Now, notice this is where my half rectangles, my narrow pieces are. So it's going to be wider this way. So my ruler may not go the whole distance, but that's okay. We can make this work. And I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to bring my ruler in 1/4 inch from each end and line it up with the outer corner, just like that. And bring this in. You see how I'm pulling that in with my fingers, just sort of raking it in. And then that way I'm not going to lose too much of my quilt. And then just come in and cut it. And that's the extent of it. So let me get this finished. I'll get my binding, and then we will go ahead and complete this quilt. It's coming along really well. And here's my finished little quilt. Look at that. Oh my goodness. It turned out great. I love that green binding around the edge, the simple quilting. It just finishes up really nice. And that's it. So you can see now how simple and how quick this kind of a quilt can be. When you use these offsets, you save your time on matching corners. You just sew everything in the same direction. All your seam allowances go in the same direction, and it goes together quick. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you're going to give it a try. And remember, download the charm square conversion chart so you can see how many charm squares you'll need for many different size quilts. That way you can make exactly what you need. All right. Well, thank you for being here today. As always, it's such a pleasure. I love doing this with you. Thank you. Have a fantastic rest of your day.